Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we are dissecting, literally and figuratively, one of the absolute most infamous, captivating, and just flat-out bizarre pop culture phenomena of the entire 1990s. We're talking about a piece of film that had everybody, from your next-door neighbor to esteemed scientists, completely glued to their television screens, questioning literally everything they knew about humanity's place in the universe. So, think about this. What actually happens when a 16-minute, grainy black and white piece of footage manages to fool the entire world? Back in August 1995, a television broadcast claimed to show the top-secret medical dissection of a real extraterrestrial being supposedly recovered from the famous 1947 Roswell crash. It was an overnight global mystery. But the story of how this footage actually came to be and how it spectacularly unraveled is honestly wilder than the idea of aliens themselves. Okay, let's dive into Section 1, the 1995 worldwide sensation. To really grasp this, we have to map out the timeline. The mythology actually begins way back in 1947 with the legendary Roswell incident, where a supposed flying disc crashed in New Mexico. For decades, rumors were just swirling about government cover-ups and recovered alien bodies. Then, fast forward almost 50 years to 1995, a London-based video producer named Ray Santilli releases a film purporting to be leaked U.S. military footage of an autopsy on one of those exact beings. The Fox network broadcasted it under the title Alien Autopsy, Fact or Fiction, hosted by John Humphreys. And get this, it wasn't until 2006, over a decade later, that the people behind the curtain finally confessed to the whole illusion. To give you an idea of the absolute cultural grip this had on us, Time magazine declared that the film sparked a debate with an intensity not lavished on any home movie since the Zapruder film. That is a massive comparison. It was broadcast all over the globe, the UK, Japan, France, Italy. Millions and millions of people watched it, earning the highest ratings of any Fox News broadcast up to that date. People were just completely fascinated and heavily divided over whether they were witnessing the greatest scientific discovery in human history or just the greatest practical joke of all time. Which brings us to Section 2, the 2006 Confessions. So, how did the truth finally come out? We're fast-forwarding to 2006, to the moment the illusion was publicly shattered on a Sky One documentary called Emin Investigates. But what's truly bizarre here is the nature of the confession itself. Producer Ray Santilli stated, and I quote, "I didn't fake alien footage, we restored it." Wait, what? When confronted, Santilli and his partner Gary Shufield admitted they did in fact film the autopsy themselves, but Santilli insisted it wasn't a total hoax. His story was that back in 1992, he'd actually bought authentic 1947 footage from a former military cameraman. But because the film had degraded so badly from heat and humidity, he had to hire special effects guys to literally recreate or, restore what he remembered seeing on that original film. Well, let's look at the harsh reality. The actual creative team behind the camera, director Spyros Malaris and Royal Academy-trained sculptor John Humphreys, eventually came forward with a totally different story. Malaris stated emphatically that there was absolutely no original film. Zero. The whole thing was pitched by Malaris after Santilli claimed to have alien footage, but had literally nothing to show for it. So Malaris and Humphreys just built the entire thing from scratch with a budget of about £30,000 provided by an investor. It was a 100% total fabrication. And this brilliantly illustrates Section 3, dissecting the fake alien. This brings us to the most fascinating and, frankly, kind of gross part of the whole explainer. How exactly do you build a convincing extraterrestrial on a budget in 1995? Well, John Humphreys had just 3.5 weeks to build this creature. First, he took a plaster cast of his own 10-year-old son to get that humanoid but slightly unproportioned base shape. Next, to make the internal organs look visceral and real on a grainy black and white camera, they went to a local butcher. No kidding. They filled the alien cavity with sheep brains, chicken entrails, and modified animal organs coated in latex. And for that dark, terrifying alien blood, that was just ordinary raspberry jam. Now, of course, it wasn't perfect. Experts quickly spotted some glaring medical anomalies. Pathologists pointed out that the creature lacked mimic facial muscles, which totally contradicted the idea of a highly intelligent large-brain species. Also, the doctors in the video wore these anti-contamination suits with glass windows, which would be completely inadequate for a real biohazard situation. But honestly, my absolute favorite detail? The alien's horrific leg wound. During filming, an air bubble ruined the latex on the leg, so they sent Humphreys back to the butcher, bought a joint of lamb, shoved it right into the hollow latex leg, and blowtorched it to look like a charred wound. You really can't make this stuff up.
Let's move on to Section 4, Staging the Deception.
So, we have a jam-filled alien. Great. Now, how do you stage the greatest military cover-up in television history? Well, the film purported to be shot inside a sterile, highly classified U.S. military laboratory in Fort Worth, Texas. The reality? It was an empty living room in a residential flat in Camden Town, London. The flat actually belonged to the director's girlfriend, who was the primary researcher for the hoax. And by the way, she actually played the nurse in the film. They bought vintage 1940s surgical tools and a 1947 wall telephone just to make the set look authentic, and shot the whole thing on a Springwild Bell and Howell camera.
And the elaborate subterfuge they used to protect this hoax was just incredible. Broadcasters were constantly demanding to interview the supposed original military cameraman. So director Spyros Millers flew out to Los Angeles, found an elderly homeless man who happened to be an ex-actor, paid him $500, and put him in a motel room. They gave him a prosthetic nose and chin, handed him a script, and filmed him confessing to shooting the footage. The guy had absolutely no idea what he was actually a part of, and to this very day, his true identity remains a complete mystery.
And the aftermath of the shoot is so darkly comical, because they actually filmed 2 autopsies. Yeah, the first one had medical inaccuracies, so they had to scramble and film a second one the very next day. They had multiple jam-filled alien bodies just lying around a London flat. So how do you hide the evidence of the century? They literally chopped the foam and latex puppets into small pieces, stuffed them into ordinary black bin liners, and drove all around London dumping extraterrestrial body parts into municipal rubbish bins.
Which brings us to Section 5, the Restoration Dispute. What makes this explainer so utterly fascinating is that even after the confession, the hoaxers themselves cannot agree on the truth. We enter this fantastic layer of meta-deception. To this day, producer Ray Santilli maintains the origin was real 1947 footage. His motive was to restore a damaged truth for the public, and his legacy is protecting a core secret. He even claims a few frames of the broadcast are the genuine 1947 film. Meanwhile, director Spyros Millers flat out denies this. He says it is a 100% original fake. The motive was simply to make money, test the media, and later reveal it as a grand magic trick. It is literally a hoax wrapped inside a hoax.
Now for our final segment, Section 6, Why We Wanted It.
So the absolutely crucial point here is, why did we fall for this? How did a rubber puppet filled with butcher shop scraps capture the attention of the entire globe? Well, anthropologists like Marco Benoit Carbone have studied this exact phenomenon. They call this a cultural apocalypse, the staging of humanity's loss of existential coordinates to process societal anxieties. Think about it. The alien autopsy footage arrived in 1995, right at the approach of a new millennium. Society was grappling with massive sweeping anxieties about genetic engineering, the sheer vastness of space, and a deep, growing distrust of government institutions and power. The autopsy footage essentially served as a blank canvas for all of that. Whether you saw the alien as a biological freak, a demonic entity, or a victim of a military cover-up, it allowed humanity to project and process our deepest fears about the unknown.
Which brings us to our final and perhaps most provocative thought of this explainer. Back in 1995, millions of people were entirely captivated, terrified, and conceptually challenged by what turned out to be a latex puppet filled with raspberry jam in a London apartment. So we really have to ask ourselves, if a puppet can spark a global debate like that, when the day finally comes that we encounter the real thing, will we even be ready? Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive, and as always, keep questioning what you see.